The kingdom of Zuwara was known for its wealth and beauty, but within the grand palace walls, a heartbreaking tragedy was unfolding. Lady Adana, the beloved wife of King Obaro and the mother of Princess Niafe, was dead. It happened so suddenly that whispers of foul play spread like wildfire. One day, she was full of life, her laughter echoing through the halls as she played with her only daughter. The next, she collapsed in her chambers, her lips turning blue, her breath shallow, and her beautiful brown eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Niafe, just 16, had never known such pain. She clung to her mother's lifeless body, screaming for her to wake up, but no amount of tears could bring her back. The palace healers claimed it was an illness, but the servants spoke in hushed tones of poison, of betrayal, of a dark force lurking in the shadows. King Obaro, blinded by grief, refused to question it. He locked himself away, leaving Niafe to mourn alone. Then, just months after Adana's death, something even more shocking happened. King Obaro remarried. His new wife, Zakina, arrived like a soft breeze, her beauty captivating, her voice gentle as silk. She spoke kindly to Niafe, held her hands, and whispered promises of love and care. But behind her sweet smile, something sinister lay hidden. The palace servants felt it in the way her eyes lingered on the throne, in the way she watched Niafe, not with love, but with something cold and calculating. Niafe didn't understand it yet, but her life was about to change forever. The woman who had just stepped into the palace wasn't here to heal a broken family. She was here to destroy it. When Zakina first entered the palace, she was like a gentle breeze after a storm. She dressed in soft silks, spoke in sweet, calming tones, and touched King Obaro's hand with careful affection. She played the role of a devoted wife so well that even the palace servants, who had once whispered suspicions about her, started to believe she truly cared for the king and his daughter. But beneath the surface, behind the painted smile and kind words, Zakina was nothing but a snake waiting for the right moment to strike. From the very beginning, she despised Niafe. The girl was young, beautiful, and, worst of all, the rightful heir to the throne. Every time Zakina looked at her, a wave of jealousy and hatred swelled in her chest. She knew that as long as Niafe remained in the palace, she would always be in the way. The king's heart, no matter how broken, still belonged to his daughter. The people still whispered Niafe's name with love. That was something Zakina could not allow. She needed to turn the king against his own flesh and blood, but she was too clever to do it all at once. No, she would do it the way poison spreads, slowly, silently, until the damage was too great to undo. At first, it was just small things. Zakina would sigh whenever Niafe entered the room, shaking her head as if disappointed. If the girl spoke, Zakina would glance at the king with a look of pity, as if she were embarrassed by Niafe's words. If Niafe laughed, Zakina would press a hand to her chest and say, "She has no respect for your grief, my king. See how she plays while you suffer." She whispered in his ear at night, when he was at his weakest. "I tried to guide her, Obaro, but she will not listen. She does not love you the way she should." She faked tears, pretending to be hurt by Niafe's supposed disobedience. "I only want to be a mother to her," she would say, her voice trembling. "But she rejects me. She treats me as an enemy, my love. Perhaps she wishes I were gone." The words sank deep into the king's heart. He was already a broken man, still mourning the loss of Adana, still drowning in sorrow. Zakina's lies became his truth. He started to watch Niafe differently. Where once he saw a kind and loving daughter, he now saw a selfish, ungrateful child. He grew colder, distant. The changes were subtle at first: shorter conversations, colder looks, the absence of his usual warmth. But then it became worse. He stopped inviting her to royal meetings. He dismissed her when she tried to speak. He started praising Zakina more, even in moments when she was cruel. And Niafe, confused and heartbroken, had no idea why her father, her protector, her hero, was slipping away from her. One evening, she ran to him, desperate for his love, and wrapped her arms around him like she used to when she was a little girl. "Father, what have I done?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why do you not love me anymore?" King Obaro stiffened under her touch. He did not embrace her back. Instead, he gently removed her hands from around his waist and looked at her with empty eyes. "You should listen to your mother, Niafe," he said, his voice cold. Niaf's heart shattered. Zakina, standing nearby, hid her smile behind a delicate hand. She had done it. She had turned the king against his own daughter. And now, with Niaf left alone and unloved, it was time for the next step in her plan, to remove her from the palace forever. Zakina had already planted the seed of doubt in King Obaro's heart. But she wasn't done yet. It wasn't enough for the king to be cold to his daughter. She wanted him to see Niafe as an enemy. She wanted her completely powerless, completely alone. She started small. "My king, the servants whisper that Niafe disrespects you," she said one evening as they sat together. "She speaks of you as if you are weak. She says you care more for me than for her." King Obaro frowned, but said nothing. The idea disturbed him, but he wasn't ready to believe it, so Zakina pushed further. She ordered her own daughter, Dumisa, to provoke Niafe in the hallways. "Say cruel things to her," she instructed. "Blame her for her mother's death. Make her angry." And Dumisa did exactly that. She taunted Niafe, whispered lies in her ear, and even went so far as to spill wine on her dress during a royal feast. Niafe, tired of the torment, snapped. "Stay away from me, Dumisa," she yelled. Zakina gasped loudly, making sure the entire court saw her fake horror. "You dare raise your voice in the palace?" she said, pretending to be hurt. Then she turned to the king and added, "You see, my love, this is what I have been telling you. She has no respect for you, for the palace, for me." King Obaro's anger flared. "Enough, Niafe," he roared. "You will learn discipline and respect." The very next day, Zakina convinced the king to strip Niafe of her royal privileges. "She must learn humility," she said sweetly. "She must understand the value of hard work." And so, Niafe, once a princess who had been dressed in silk and dined with nobles, was now forced to work as a servant in the very palace she once ruled. She scrubbed floors until her hands bled. She served food to those who used to bow before her. The other servants, afraid of Zakina, dared not speak up for her. Days turned into weeks, and the humiliation only grew. Dumisa would laugh as Niafe carried heavy water jugs across the palace courtyard. "Careful, dear sister," she mocked. "You wouldn't want to spill that and make father even angrier." But the worst part wasn't the hard labor or the insults. It was the way her father looked at her. He no longer saw his daughter. He no longer saw the little girl he once held in his arms. He saw nothing. And that was exactly what Zakina wanted. Niaf had once been a princess, dressed in silk and gold, walking proudly through the halls of the palace. Now she was nothing more than a slave. Every morning before the sun even rose, she was woken by a harsh kick from a guard. "Get up, girl. The queen wants the floors scrubbed." There was no warm bath, no fine breakfast, just cold stone beneath her feet and a long day of suffering ahead. Zakina and her daughter, Dumisa, made sure she never forgot her place. While Dumisa feasted on roasted meats and sweet honey cakes, Niafe was given nothing but scraps, if she was given food at all. Some days, she went to bed with nothing in her stomach but the bitter taste of hunger. When she moved too slowly, she was whipped. When she spoke too softly, she was slapped. When she dared to look Zakina in the eye, she was thrown to the ground. "You think you're still a princess?" Zakina sneered one night, grabbing Niafe by the chin. "You're nothing, and soon, even your father won't remember you exist." Dumisa was even crueler. She treated Niafe like a toy, finding new ways to make her suffer. "Polish my shoes," she would order, then purposely step into the mud before handing them over. "Oh, and if they're not shining like diamonds, I'll tell mother you tried to steal from me." But the worst part was the nights. Niafe was not allowed to sleep in the palace chambers. Her bed was the cold, hard floor of the servants' quarters. If she was lucky. Some nights, Zakina forced her outside, making her sleep in the freezing courtyard like a stray dog. She curled up against the stone walls, her thin dress offering no warmth. The wind cut through her skin, and her body shivered violently. She bit her lip to keep from crying because crying only made it worse. She had no one, no friends, no family, no hope, and yet, deep inside her, a small fire still burned, a fire that whispered, "One day, you will rise again." But until then, she had to survive. Zakina had been patient, but now she was done waiting. Niafe had suffered, had been beaten, humiliated, and stripped of everything, but she was still alive. And as long as she was alive, she was a threat. The people of Zuwara still remembered her as their princess. If she ever found a way to escape, if she ever spoke the truth, it could ruin everything Zakina had built. She had to get rid of her, forever. Late one night, as King Obaro sat in his chambers, lost in thought, Zakina knelt beside him and let out a soft, sorrowful sigh. "My king," she whispered, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I fear for you. I fear for this kingdom." Obaro looked at her, weary and confused. "What do you mean?" Zakina lowered her head, pretending to be afraid. "It's Nyaf. She has lost her mind." The king's face darkened, but he said nothing, so Zakina continued, her voice trembling, as if she were speaking a painful truth. "She talks to shadows, my love. She mumbles strange things at night. The servants say they have seen her laughing to herself in the dark. I tried to help her. I truly did. But she is dangerous now." Obaro frowned, shaking his head. "No, Nyafe would never." "She attacked Dumisa," Zakina interrupted, her eyes filling with fake tears. "My poor child is terrified. And last night, she spoke of your death, my king. She said she wished you were gone." Obaro's heart clenched. He wanted to deny it, to believe it was all a mistake, but Zakina had spent too long poisoning his mind. The man he had once been, the father who adored Nyafe, was long gone. Now, there was only a broken king, a man too blind to see the truth. Zakina touched his face gently. "I know this is hard, my love, but we must do what is best for Zuwara. She cannot stay here. She is a danger to us all." The king closed his eyes. What must be done? Zakina hid her smile. The moment she had been waiting for had finally arrived. "She must be sent away," she said softly. "Far, far away, where she can no longer harm anyone." And just like that, it was decided. That night, while the kingdom slept, Zakina summoned her most loyal guards. "Take the girl deep into the wilderness," she ordered, her voice like ice. "Do not kill her, leave her there. Let the creatures of the wild do the rest." The guards hesitated. They had once served Nyafe when she was still a princess. But Zakina's gaze was sharp, filled with unspoken threats. They knew better than to refuse. As they dragged Nyaf from the palace, she kicked and screamed. "Let me go!" she cried. "Where are you taking me? Father!" But the king never came. He never even looked out his window. And so, with nothing but the rags on her back, Nyaf was taken far away from the only home she had ever known, abandoned in the heart of a cursed wilderness, left to die. The journey to the Nyoka forest was long and cruel. The palace guards dragged Nyafe behind them, her wrists bound with rough rope. She stumbled over stones, her feet bleeding from the harsh ground, but they didn't stop. They didn't care. She was no longer a princess, just a prisoner on her way to die. As they entered the forest, the air grew colder, thicker, as if the trees themselves were alive and watching. Legends spoke of the Nyoka forest, a cursed land where no man dared to enter after sunset. It was said to be filled with wild beasts, spirits of the damned, and creatures that fed on lost souls. Even the bravest warriors feared it. But Zakina had chosen this place for a reason. The guards stopped at the edge of a dark, twisted clearing. The towering trees blocked out the moon, leaving the ground covered in eerie shadows. One of the guards cut the ropes from Nyaf's wrists, shoving her forward. "This is where your journey ends," he muttered. Nyafe turned, her eyes wide with fear. "Please, don't do this," she begged. "I have done nothing wrong." The guards avoided her gaze. Maybe, deep down, some of them felt guilt. But Zakina's orders were final. Without another word, they mounted their horses and rode away, their figures disappearing into the night. And just like that, Nyaf was alone. The silence was deafening. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying voices she couldn't understand. The air smelled of damp earth and something rotten, something unnatural. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, her stomach twisted in hunger. She hadn't eaten in days. Her body was weak, shaking with exhaustion, but she couldn't stop moving. Not here, not in this place where danger lurked in every shadow. As she wandered deeper into the cursed forest, twigs snapped under her feet. She heard rustling in the distance. Then, low, guttural growls. Her breath hitched. She wasn't alone. Something was watching her. Something was hunting her. Nyafe's heart pounded as she stumbled forward, her legs barely able to carry her. She could feel eyes in the darkness, waiting, circling. She had escaped Zakina's cruelty, but now death had found her in another form, and there was no one left to save her. Night fell like a heavy curtain over the Nyoka forest. The trees, twisted and ancient, loomed over Niaf like silent giants. The wind howled through the branches, carrying whispers of lost souls. She was weak, starving, and freezing, but she forced herself to keep moving. Every step felt like a battle, but stopping meant death. Then she heard it, a deep, bone-chilling growl. She froze. Her breath came out in short, panicked gasps as she turned her head slowly. From the shadows, glowing yellow eyes appeared. 1 pair, then 2, then 5. A pack of wolves emerged from the darkness, their sharp teeth glistening under the faint moonlight. Niaf's heart pounded. She stepped back, her foot crunching against a dry leaf. The sound made the wolves tense. They bared their fangs, growling louder. She knew what was coming. She had seen hungry dogs fight over scraps in the palace, their teeth sinking into flesh without mercy. These weren't just dogs. These were wild killers. One of the wolves crept closer, muscles tensed, ready to strike. Niaf clenched her fists. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The lead wolf lunged, and then, out of nowhere, a deep, commanding voice echoed through the trees. "Stop!" The wolves froze mid-attack, their ears flattened, their tails lowered, their entire bodies stiff with obedience. Niaf gasped, her wide eyes searching the darkness for the source of the voice. A hooded figure stepped forward, moving with an eerie calmness. The long cloak swayed with each step, blending into the night. Though the face was hidden beneath the hood, Niafe could feel the power radiating from this person. The wolves whimpered and backed away, lowering their heads as if bowing before a king. The figure stopped in front of Niaf, towering over her. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, in a voice as steady as the wind, the stranger spoke. "You do not belong here." Niaf, still shaking, swallowed hard. Who are you?" The figure tilted their head slightly. "The one who just saved your life." And with those words, everything changed. Niafe stared at the hooded figure, her body still trembling from fear and exhaustion. The wolves, who had been moments away from tearing her apart, now stood still like obedient soldiers. Whoever this person was, they had power that even beasts of the wild respected. The figure turned away from her and whistled sharply. The wolves disappeared into the shadows, their glowing eyes vanishing one by one. Then, without looking back, the stranger began walking away. "Come," the voice commanded. Niafe hesitated. She didn't know if she was being led to safety or deeper into danger, but she had no choice. If she stayed in the forest alone, she wouldn't survive the night. Swallowing her fear, she followed. They walked for what felt like hours, deeper into the forbidden lands. The trees grew taller, their thick branches blocking out the sky. Strange symbols were carved into the trunks, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Niafe felt like she had stepped into a hidden world, one that didn't exist on any royal map. Finally, they reached a clearing. Before her stood a massive stone fortress, hidden deep within the wilderness. Torches burned along the walls, their flames flickering against the cold night air. At the gates, armed warriors stood guard, their faces masked with carved wooden helmets. They were unlike any soldiers she had ever seen, strong, silent, and deadly. The hooded figure turned to her, and for the first time, lowered the hood. He was a man with sharp, piercing eyes and dark tribal markings across his face. His presence was powerful, his gaze unreadable. "My name is Cabello," he said. "I am the leader of the Nayati Brotherhood." Niafe had heard whispers of them before, a secret warrior clan that lived outside the reach of the kingdom, feared by even the bravest soldiers. They were ghosts, shadows that moved unseen, protectors of the old ways. Cabello studied her, his expression unreadable. "The forest did not kill you. The wolves obeyed me, but they spared you. That means something." He paused, then added, "You are meant for more than suffering." Tears burned in Niaf's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "My stepmother tried to kill me," she said, her voice shaking. "She has poisoned my father's heart. She took everything from me." Cabello nodded slowly. "Then it is time you take something back." Over the next months, Niafe trained under the warriors of the Nyati Brotherhood. She learned to fight, not with the stiff, controlled movements of palace guards, but with the speed and precision of a true warrior. She learned how to move unseen, how to use the shadows as her ally. She learned to track, to hunt, to survive. The weak, broken girl who had once cried herself to sleep on the cold palace floors no longer existed. Niaf was becoming something else, something stronger, something dangerous. And as she sharpened her blade under the moonlight, she made a silent vow. Zakina had stolen her life. Now, she would take it back, with fire and blood. Niafe had become stronger. The weak girl who was once beaten, starved and cast away had been replaced by a warrior with fire in her heart. But even after months of training, there was still a shadow of pain inside her, a wound that refused to heal. The memory of her mother Adana haunted her. She had died too suddenly, too mysteriously, and deep in her soul, Niaf knew there was more to the story. One evening, as she sat sharpening her blade, Cabello approached her. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something different that night. "You are ready to know the truth," he said. Niafe frowned. "The truth?" Cabello gestured for her to follow, leading her through the warrior camp, past the burning torches, and into a hidden chamber carved into the side of a mountain. The room smelled of herbs and old parchment. Inside, an elder woman sat by a fire, her face lined with the wisdom of many years. She looked up as they entered, her dark eyes locking onto Niaf's. "You seek answers," the woman said in a voice that sent chills down Niaf's spine. Niaf swallowed hard. "Tell me what happened to my mother." The woman sighed, closing her eyes for a moment before speaking. "Your mother, Adana, was not just a noble woman. She was a healer, a protector of ancient magic. She knew secrets that others feared. And Zakina wanted power. She could not take the throne while Adana was alive." Niafe's hands clenched into fists. "So she killed her?" The elder nodded. "Yes. Zakina used a slow poison, one that mimicked an illness. Your mother grew weaker each day, but no one suspected the truth. And when she died, Zakina made her move." Niafe felt her heart pounding so hard she thought it would break. "And my father, why did he let her?" The elder's eyes darkened. "Because she did not just poison your mother, she poisoned your father's mind. Zakina is no ordinary woman. She dabbles in forbidden magic, the kind that bends the will of even the strongest men. She whispered lies into his soul, made him see what she wanted him to see." Niaf's breath hitched. It all made sense now. Her father hadn't abandoned her because he stopped loving her. He had been trapped under a spell, a puppet, a prisoner. Rage burned inside her like a wildfire. Her mother had been murdered. Her father had been turned into a mindless shell of the man he once was. And she had been thrown away like she was nothing. Her fists trembled, but she was no longer that helpless girl. She stood, her voice steady but filled with fury. "I will return to Zuwara. I will expose Zakina's crimes. And I will take back what is mine." Cabello watched her, his face still unreadable, but there was the faintest hint of pride in his eyes. "Then it is time," he said. "The Queen of Zuwara must rise." And with that, Niafe prepared for the battle that would change everything. The kingdom of Zuwara had changed. The streets were quieter, the people thinner, their eyes filled with fear. The once golden palace stood tall, but there was no warmth in its walls, only coldness, only shadows. The throne belonged to a monster, and the people suffered under her rule. But tonight, something was different. A stranger walked through the marketplace, dressed in a hooded cloak, blending into the crowd. She moved with purpose, her steps silent, her eyes watching. No one recognized her. No one knew that beneath the disguise was the princess they had long forgotten. Niaf had returned. It had been years since she was left to die in the cursed forest. Years since she had cried herself to sleep, wondering why her father had abandoned her. But that girl was gone. She had shed her weakness, her fear. She was no longer just a lost princess. She was a warrior, a leader, the head of the Nayati Brotherhood, and she had come back for justice. As she walked, she listened to the whispers of the people. "The queen is cruel," one woman murmured to another. "She raises the taxes, but where does the gold go?" "To her and her daughter," the other woman hissed. "They sit in their palace, drowning in riches while we starve." Niaf's blood boiled. Zakina had drained the kingdom dry, just as she had drained the life from her mother. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. The time to act was coming soon. She moved deeper into the city, her eyes scanning every corner, every guard. She had planned for this moment, prepared for it. The Nayati Brotherhood was already in position, waiting for her signal. But first, she needed to see the palace again, to stand before the place that had once been her home. That night, under the cover of darkness, she slipped past the palace gates. The guards were lazy, untrained, nothing like the warriors she had fought beside. They had grown too comfortable under Zakina's rule. It would be their downfall. As she climbed the stone walls, she felt a strange mix of emotions: pain, anger, but also something dangerous, something Zakina had never expected: power. She reached the highest balcony and peered inside. There, sitting on a throne that did not belong to her, was Zakina. She looked older, but the wickedness in her eyes had not faded. Beside her sat Dumisa, her daughter, wearing silk and jewels, a spoiled queen in waiting. Niafe's lips curled into a smirk. Soon, their time would end. She had returned, not as a helpless girl, but as a storm, and the kingdom of Zuwara was about to feel her wrath. The grand feast was the most extravagant event of the year. The palace glittered with golden chandeliers, silk banners, and endless tables of food. Zakina sat on the throne, draped in jewels, her cold smile never fading. Dumisa sat beside her, laughing as servants poured her the finest wine. They had no idea that tonight would be their last night in power. Niafe stood among the guests, disguised in royal robes. She had waited for this moment for years, and now it was time. The Nayati Brotherhood was hidden among the crowd, watching, waiting for her command. A servant stepped forward to pour Zakina more wine, but before the goblet reached her lips, Niafe's voice rang through the hall. "Do you drink in peace, Queen Zakina?" she asked loudly. "Knowing the blood you have spilled?" The room fell silent. Heads turned. Zakina's eyes narrowed at the stranger who dared to speak so boldly. "And who dares speak to me this way?" she hissed. Niafe pulled back her hood. Gasps filled the room. Servants dropped their trays. Nobles stepped back in shock. The princess they had thought dead was standing before them, alive, strong, and unafraid. Zakina's face twisted in rage. "Impossible!" she snarled. "You were left to die?" Niafe stepped forward. "Yes, I was. Left in the cursed forest like an animal. But fate had other plans." The crowd whispered among themselves. Zakina's hands clenched the arms of her throne. "You have no place here, Niafe. You were cast out." "I was cast out because you wanted me dead," Niafe interrupted. Her voice was clear, powerful. "Because you poisoned my mother and took my father's mind with dark magic." The crowd gasped again. All eyes turned to Zakina. Zakina's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Lies," she spat. "More foolish lies from a desperate girl." Niafe lifted her hand, and with a single snap of her fingers, the doors burst open. The Nayati Brotherhood stormed in, dragging an old palace servant forward, a woman who had worked in the royal chambers when Adana was still alive. Tears filled the woman's eyes as she pointed a trembling finger at Zakina. "It's true," she cried. "I saw it. She poisoned Queen Adana's tea every night. She cursed the king with dark magic." More voices rose from the crowd. Servants, former guards, nobles. One by one, they spoke of the cruelty they had seen, the suffering they had endured. The whispers turned to shouts. "Traitor! Murderer! You stole our queen!" Zekina's face paled. She reached for King Obaro, who sat silently beside her, his face blank, lost in a fog of magic. "Obaro, stop them!" she commanded. "I am your queen." But for the first time in years, King Obaro blinked. He looked at Niafe, recognition flickering in his dull eyes. And then, as if the spell had finally cracked, he turned to Zakina with disgust. "What have you done?" he whispered. Zakina stood, her hands shaking. The people were no longer afraid of her. They were angry. They were hungry for justice. Dumisa grabbed her mother's arm. "Mother, what do we do?" Zakina looked around, realizing there was no escape. Niafe stepped forward, her voice steady. "Justice will be served tonight." The crowd roared, their fury rising like a storm. The reign of the wicked queen was over. The night was cold, the air thick with the howls of distant wolves. Niafe stood tall, her grip tight around the chains that bound Zakina and Dumisa. Their once elegant gowns were torn, their jeweled crowns long gone. No more power, no more servants, Just two terrified women being dragged to the place they had once left her to die. Zakina struggled, her voice sharp with desperation. Niafe, please, I raised you. I am your mother now. Niafe stopped walking and turned to face her. Her eyes burned with fury. You are not my mother, she hissed. My mother was kind, loving, and strong. You are nothing but a snake. Dumisa whimpered beside her mother, her arrogance shattered. Please, we were only following tradition. The strong rule, the weak fall. That is how the world works. Niafe laughed bitterly. Then let's see if you're strong enough to survive. With a final pull, she dragged them to the heart of the cursed Nyoka forest. The trees loomed like silent watchers, the wind whispering secrets of death. This was the place where she had been abandoned, left to starve, to freeze, to be torn apart by beasts. But fate had spared her. Now, it would not spare them. She unchained them and stepped back. Dumisa immediately dropped to her knees. Please, Niafe, don't leave us here. We are your family. Family. Niaf's voice was sharp as a blade. Did you think of family when you laughed as I starved? When you watched me suffer and did nothing? Zakina's face twisted with rage. You think this makes you powerful? You think this makes you better than me? Niaf smiled coldly. Number, but it does make things right. The first growl came from the darkness, then another. Yellow eyes glowed between the trees, moving closer, surrounding them. The wolves of Nyoka forest had found their prey. Zakina and Dumisa screamed, scrambling backward. No, please, don't leave us here. But Niaf had already turned away. She did not need to watch. Justice had already begun. As she stepped out of the forest, the screams faded into the night. The girl they had tried to kill was gone. In her place stood a queen. The sun rose over Zuwara, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The palace, once filled with fear and corruption, now stood in silence, waiting for its new ruler. The people gathered in the courtyard, whispering, their eyes filled with hope and uncertainty. Would the lost princess truly take the throne? Would she bring peace after so many years of suffering? Niaf walked through the palace gates, her steps strong, her heart steady. She was no longer the helpless girl who had been cast out. She was a warrior, a survivor. She had faced death and returned stronger. Now it was time to claim what was hers. Inside the throne room, King Obaro sat with his head in his hands. He looked thinner, older, like a man who had just awakened from a nightmare. When he saw Niafe enter, tears filled his eyes. He rose from his throne and fell to his knees before her. My daughter, he whispered, his voice broken. I failed you. I let her poison my mind. I let her take everything from you. Can you ever forgive me? Niafa looked down at the man who was once her hero, the father who had abandoned her. She had spent years dreaming of this moment, of the anger she would feel, the hatred she would unleash. But as she looked into his tear-streaked face, she realized something. Revenge had already been served. Justice had been done. What remained now was healing. She knelt beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. I forgive you, she said softly, but the past cannot be undone. What matters now is the future. A murmur spread through the crowd as Niafe turned and walked toward the throne that had been stolen from her, the throne that rightfully belonged to her bloodline. She placed her hand on its armrest, then slowly sat down. The people watched in silence. Then, one by one, they began to kneel. First the palace guards, then the nobles, then the commoners, the merchants, the servants, until every person in the room had bowed before their new queen. A tear slid down Niaf's cheek, but she held her head high. She had fought for this moment. She had bled for it. I am Queen Niaf of Zuwara, she declared, her voice ringing through the hall. And as long as I sit on this throne, no child will ever suffer as I did. No innocent soul will be cast away. This kingdom will be strong, not because of cruelty, but because of justice. The crowd erupted into cheers, voices rising like a roaring storm. The lost princess had returned, and a queen was born.